Thank you, everybody, for coming. On behalf of the Community Senior Center, I'm Stevie Spalding, and thanks. Another good crowd today. It's great. Today, I'm really happy that we have Julie Filiberti here. You can tell who she is because she's got birds on her sweater, birds in her ears.
I do.
Julie's a board member of the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, which was founded in 1943.
Yep.
And it is in Swanton. It's 7,000 acres of waterfront and water, and it's home to the largest concentration of migratory birds and pollinators and other wonderful things. And she was quoted on Vermont Public saying that the wildlife refuge system is the only organization dedicated to protecting wild habitat and species. And they've recently experienced quite a few funding cuts. And so they're pretty much dependent on volunteers these days. Julie also has a BS in biology, and she spent 18 years in education as a paraeducator in the elementary schools. And Julie, thank you very much for coming.
Sure.
And we'll have time for questions after.
Okay. I will stand up here initially just so you guys can see my face and not my back. And I did bring, in case anybody's interested, some brochures for the Friends group. So if anybody is possibly interested in becoming a friend and helping us support the refuge, those will be up here, and you can definitely take one, and you can ask me any questions about the Friends group that you would want to. I have been a part of the Friends group for, I think, since about 2013, maybe. I started birding in 2012 when I discovered the refuge. So I think up until that point, I had only been up there one time when my kids were small, and I was hooked once I got up there and saw all the birds that were there and the wild places, and I keep getting more and more involved. So this, for me, is part of sharing the treasure of the refuge and what there is up there. Just as a show of hands, has anybody been there before? I know some of you have. Quite a few, okay. How many of you are birders? All right, you can correct me whenever you need to. So I just need to know my audience as far as what I'm talking about here, so be careful. All right, so this is just an overview of the Bird's Foot Delta at the end of the Missisquoi. And this one is not my shot. Most of the pictures you're gonna see are my shots. This one is not because I wasn't up in a helicopter or a drone, but it's really a nice photo that just kind of gives you the layout of how much water is part of the Missisquoi Refuge. All right, so I think Stevie mentioned that this is federal lands. The Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge is one of two wildlife refuges in Vermont. The Silvio Oconte Nulhegan Division is up in the northeast corner of the state, up in that area. And then Missisquoi is kind of the northwest corner of the state. So it's in Swanton. It's just outside of Swanton on Route 78, if you haven't been there before. And it encompasses the delta of the Missisquoi and the endpoint of the 767,000 acre Missisquoi watershed. So the Missisquoi starts over further east in Vermont. It goes up through Canada a little bit. So it's a pretty big watershed in northern Vermont. And as Stevie said, it was established in 1943 for migratory birds. And there's close to 6,700 acres. So here's another kind of overview. You can see that it's mostly wetland habitat, encompassing the Missisquoi River as well as the Dead Creek, which you probably can't read it from where you are, but it's kind of the offshoot that goes off of the Missisquoi out into Missisquoi Bay. There are also 3 man-made impoundments of the refuge. You can kind of see those there. There's Cranberry Pool, which is right here, and the Big Marsh Slough is there, and Goose Bay Pool is here. And those are impoundments because those were created by moving the earth and creating some dikes to hold back in the water. Let's see, Goose Bay Pool is 110 acres. The Big Marsh Slough is 600 acres. And Cranberry Pool, I don't have Cranberry Pool on here. But there's quite a bit of water there. So, and this one, it's kind of the same view, but you can see how much of the refuge is actually closed. So all of those pink and blue areas are not really open to the public. But you'll notice the waterways are. So the river itself, you can go in any time of year. I mean, if it's frozen and you want to walk down it, you could. Those are all areas that you can go to. So this refuge is situated along the Atlantic Flyway, and so it's an excellent stopover for migrating birds. And really, in both spring and fall migration, there's pretty heavy use. I would say more in fall than in spring, but it's right along the flyway, so it definitely gets use. So you can go on the rivers as a person, and you can also go on one of the 5 trails, and those are kind of marked in the black that you can see there. So the difference between the pink and the blue, the pink is there's actually some hunting that occurs. So one of the purposes of a national wildlife refuge is, the main purpose is to protect habitat, but their hunting is also one of the allowed things. So it's definitely permitted, it's regulated, and so those pink areas are areas where there's either waterfowl hunting or some big game hunting that happens. The blue areas are completely off limits to anything other than the refuge staff for their purposes to maintain the habitat. So the refuge itself is designated an important bird area, and it's also designated a Ramsar Convention Site of International Importance, and for the same reason, for migrating waterfowl. 2013, they got the Ramsar designation, which is international all over the world, and it was the 38th designation in the United States of a Ramsar area. So the area is a vital stopover for a variety of ducks in both their northern and southern migrations. So these, along with the Canada geese, you can see a mallard there on the left and some northern pintails. And this is right across from the headquarters. There's a field there that floods every spring, and it's a great place to be able to catch some ducks. The refuge is also a good stopover for other water birds. Great egrets are very plentiful in the late summer and the fall. And they roost together in the trees. In the fall, you can really see a lot at once, either flying in or out of the closed areas at dawn and dusk, which is, if you catch it right, it's pretty amazing to see a bunch of them. Occasionally, a rarity shows up. So this is not a great egret, this is a snowy egret. And we usually don't get those in Vermont. They're more of a coastal species in their migration and further west. But 2023, one showed up at the refuge. So that was a treat to be able to catch that there. Shorebirds make a big appearance in both the spring and the fall. And these were also in that flooded field that was across from the headquarters. And it's really a great place, like if you want to go in March, April, when things are just starting to thaw out, and it's like, it's not too nice, you don't want to really go out and walk around in the mud, but you want to go for a drive, go up here right across from the headquarters as this field is flooding and melting. And it's perfect because you get really good looks at birds from your car, and your car is serving as a blind, so you're not scaring them away for the most part, and you can just sit there right along the road and watch them. So take that as a tidbit of information when you're like going stir crazy in March and April. So the low lake levels in the summer and fall create mudflats at both the outlets of the Missisquoi and the Dead Creek. And these mudflats always attract quite a few shorebirds. We get sandpipers, dunlins, sanderlings, dowitchers. So a lot of these shots on calm days, I won't do it when there's wind, because getting there, you sometimes have to go over some broad lake areas. But if it's a calm day, I'll take my kayak up and kind of beach on some of these mud flats. And shorebirds are great because if you're not moving around, they just stay put. If they see a predator, they're gonna flush, but they get very used to you and you can really get up close to them. So these shorebirds that are using the refuge, they're flying at night, like most birds do, and then in the daytime, they're down and they're resting and they're eating. So they just kind of go back and forth. So a lot of these on that frack there are just kind of chilling, not actively eating. So there's always a lot of black-bellied plovers that come through, and if you get lucky, you can pick out an American golden plover among them, which is what this bird is. Looks a little bit different than the black-bellied plovers. The bad thing about the shorebirds coming through in the fall, they've usually lost their breeding plumage, so by the time we're seeing them, they have molted into their non-breeding plumage. So that makes it a little bit trickier to ID them, and they're not quite as vibrant, but the American golden plover looks a lot like a black-bellied plover. I think it has a bigger eye and a darker cap, so when you see one, it's pretty easy to tell the difference. Ruddy turnstone, that's another shorebird with very orange feet. They're also pretty common during migration. Ruddy turnstones get their name from turning stones. So what they do with their beak is they just kind of get under the leaves and the rack that's there and any little stones, and they flip them over looking for their little invertebrates. And there are usually a handful of red-necked phalaropes that show up in the fall. So these birds are fun to watch if you can find them because they swim really fast in a circle, and somehow that stirs up the invertebrates in the water so that they can feed. Unfortunately for these two, they have molted, and we don't get to see them in their beautiful breeding plumage, but as their name says, they have a nice kind of red stripe that goes up their neck and around their back, so we don't see that though. Hudsonian godwits, this is a very large shorebird, very dependable as far as showing up at the mudflats of the refuge. I think they're there every year. And these birds breed on the tundra up in Canada, and they make their stopover on their way down to southern South America. So it's a really long migration, over 10,000 miles that these birds are moving in migration. And amazingly, I just read a fact that they can fly 6,000 miles at a time without resting or eating. I mean, that's just incredible. But, the scientists are, now that they can tag these birds, the technology has improved, that they can really track what these birds are doing, and to find out that this information that, a bird like this can fly for 6,000. I mean, planes can barely do that, so it's just fascinating. This little guy is a rarity. She, I'm not sure which it is, belongs over in Europe. It's a common ringed plover. It looks very similar to the semi-palmated plovers that we have regularly here in Vermont. So I think it probably, when it was breeding, it just ventured a little too far west instead of staying over in Europe in that area. So that was fun, again, to be able to see. Very small and very hard to pick out amongst the semi-palmated plovers, but it was another rarity. This one is another one that we had. This is usually a bird that you're going to see down south, or they do make a presence north and even up into Canada, but further west from here. So in the Northeast, it's not a bird that you're usually going to see. This bird was there a couple of summers ago, and I think it thought it was a gull. It was just hanging out with the gulls. It was soaring around with the gulls. It just didn't look like a gull, so, but definitely fun to watch it. Another rarity that is a more western bird, the American avocet. This was, I think, maybe back in 2017. It was quite a few years ago. And it hung around for quite a few days. It was all by itself, but again, fun to see. This was out at the outlet of Dead Creek. There he is, kind of foraging on the mudflats. And any birder that is seriously into birding does not miss their opportunity to come up to see the black terns. These birds are there every summer. They are monitored by the refuge staff every summer as well. The refuge is the only location in Vermont where they do breed. They build floating nests. So some of those off-limit areas to any boating traffic or any people are the perfect areas for this bird to breed, because it pretty much stays undisturbed. So the refuge staff, like I said, monitors the population by doing nest surveys every year. And then they count the juveniles that fledge from the nests. And I had some statistics here. In 2017, the refuge had the highest number of state endangered black terns, 166 pairs. By 2022, the number had dropped to just 29. But the good news is it's starting to climb again. So this year, there were 54. So it had doubled from 2022. So hopefully, anything, a bad weather year anything can happen to change those numbers. But it's good to be able to see the increase happening again. So throughout the refuge, you see many varieties of signs to keep the public out. The birds like to use these signs as well. So you'll see them along the trails as well as along the waterways, just to know what your limits are. The signs are both new and old. They come in all varieties. So I'm going to take you into a couple of the areas that are beyond these signs. One of the perks of being a Friends board member and a volunteer is occasionally things go on that they need help with that you can go into these closed areas. So the first is a look at Cranberry Pool. So this was one of the man-made impoundments that folks don't get to see. The water is contained by a dike that's 3.5 miles. And believe it or not, they made this dike in 1968, and it cost $52,000. And that was it. So it contains 500 acres of Cranberry Pool. So what happens, in the spring when the waters melt, the river gets high, Cranberry Pool floods. And then they kind of close that valve so that the water can stay in there and create that wetland habitat for the summer. So there are a lot of the grass that you see there in the distance is wild rice. And the birds love the wild rice. So you can see thousands of blackbirds just utilizing that when it goes to seed in the fall. So there's me quite a few years ago, before my hair was gray. So the staff used to do duck banding each September, and that was how I got to go out to the Cranberry Pool for the first time to help with the duck banding. And you get to really get up close and personal with the waterfowl, which was nice. So I'm holding looks like a male wood duck there. But there's a variety of ducks that use the area. Some are resident breeders, some are just stopping over during migration. This green-winged teal, I think, was during migration. So it's a dabbling duck like a mallard would be, but it's a lot smaller. So we have, in Vermont, blue-winged teals and green-winged teals. We also have northern shovelers that stop by. Very handsome bird with a honkin' beak. So this is an evening view of Cranberry Pool. It always happened late in the afternoon, and depending on how many ducks we were able to contain, sometimes the sun was going down or it was even dark when we were leaving. So some nice views out there. So another one of the closed areas is Missisquoi Bog. Although the entirety of Missisquoi Bog, there is some, obviously not wild waterfowl hunting, but there is some big game hunting that can happen. But I don't know any hunters that want to go out into the bog itself and try to get a deer. And I don't think the deer are actually in the bog itself, but. So Missisquoi contains 9 natural communities that are listed as rare in the state, and Missisquoi Bog is one of those areas. It's a pitch pine woodland, and it's actually the largest bog in the Northeast. It's made up of 900 acres. There is pitch pine, which are the pines that you see there. Contains rare Virginia chain fern and a variety of sphagnum moss species, and lots of rhodora, which are the kind of the brushy shrubbery that you see there. So like most of the refuge areas, it's not open to the public, but occasionally, the Friends have sponsored a winter walk out into the bog, and that's how I was out there to get these pictures. Obviously, the bog itself was frozen so that you could walk out into it. So, as I said, it's the only one of its kind in Vermont, this pitch pine bog, and only one of a few in New England. The peat depths of the bog itself range anywhere from 2.5 to 8 feet. So you definitely only want to walk on that when it's frozen. But quite pretty, even with the frozen. It supports a variety of wildlife and serves as, I think the edges more serve as a wintering area for the white-tailed deer. So one of the birds probably that's most present here is the northern water thrush. It's a warbler, and they like kind of that forested wetland habitat like you would have at the edges of the bogs. And if you hit it at the right time in May as they're arriving and setting up their territory, like you can be overwhelmed with their presence. The old railroad passage kind of borders along the edge of McQuam Bog. And I walked that one time in May and counted 46 different singing males in my kind of trek along and I did that that was an estimate for me as I walked along, and every time I think I heard a new one, I kind of counted another one, and I was doing it on my hands. And I was just amazed when I was done how many I was able to hear. So that's just the males, so you figure there's at least probably that many females, or close to that many females. So now let me give you a little bit of a tour of some of the areas that you can visit if you come up to Missisquoi. The two main waterways, the Missisquoi River and the Dead Creek. So they're used by fishermen, waterfowl hunters use it to get to their areas, paddlers, paddle boarders, birders. It's quite busy area during the warmer weather months. In my opinion, it's really the best way to see the refuge. So if you have a canoe or kayak, you really get a taste of what it is. So as you go along the river, it's predominantly silver maple floodplain forest. And there's some green ash mixed in, some eastern cottonwood, and some swamp white oak. The understory is fairly open because it floods pretty frequently. There's nettles, jewelweed, a lot of ostrich fern. So the floodplain itself spans more than 1,000 contiguous acres along the river. And it makes that the largest intact floodplain forest in the state of Vermont. Most areas like this have been taken over with agriculture, so because it's protected area as part of the refuge, it's still intact floodplain. And the delta area, and actually the whole river area, even up the Missisquoi, was home to the Abenaki for thousands of years. So the floodplain itself with the silver maples, there's a lot of pretty big trees that have a lot of cavities that are used for nesting for different waterfowl species. The goldeneye use it, the wood ducks, the mergansers, they're all cavity nesters. So also along the river, the infamous great blue heron you'll find along the river's edges, as well as its cousin, the green heron. And occasional black-crowned night herons. So this one is an immature bird by its name, black-crowned night heron. If you've ever seen the adult version, yes, they do have a black crown. And belted kingfishers, plenty of those up and down the river, announcing themselves, chattering while they're flying. Very hard bird to get a picture of, by the way. And the river's edge and the forest also have a variety of mammalian wildlife. There's muskrats, beaver, raccoon. So from Louis Landing or Max Bend, which are two of the put-ins along the Missisquoi, it's a pretty long paddle out to Shad Island, which is the very end of the river out at the delta. But this is kind of what it looks like when you get out there. You are rewarded with views up into Canada. And it looks like Canada's far away, but it really isn't. You're almost into Canada when you make it out there. So when the water's low, as I said, there's a lot of mud flats and shallow waters that will host a variety of birds, like this common tern. And these signposts are very popular with the birds. So, and then here are some Caspian terns out on the mud flats as well. And the gulls. These are ringbills, but there are quite a few herring gulls and great black gulls as well. Sometimes you'll find them in pretty large numbers depending on what the conditions are. You will also see eagles and a lot of great blues and egrets. So in the distance, you can see right there, there's 5 great egrets, not too far away from 2 bald eagles. And you'll find peregrine falcons out there in the fall. They love to scope out the shorebirds. So if you spend any time out there trying to take pictures of shorebirds, you got to look for the merlins and the peregrines because they just scatter the birds everywhere. And here's one going on his relentless chase to grab something. Okay, so let's take a peek at some of the places that you can go on foot. This is the Discovery Trail. It's popular because it's a short hike and it's the only trail located right at the headquarters building. So a lot of people that are unfamiliar with the refuge kind of make it to the headquarters and the trail is right there. So there's quite a bit of raised boardwalk that goes over these wooded wetlands that you can kind of see off to the side there. And it follows the edge of Missisquoi Bog for a little ways. So it's usually loaded with birds in the spring there. Most of the habitat is wooded wetlands. There's some shrubby areas and some managed grasslands that this trail goes through. So it's easy to find some common yellowthroat there. And they breed in the shrubbery. So this one is actually tagged, which was kind of fascinating, and has a whole mouthful. So obviously she is feeding quite a few little nestlings somewhere. They like to put their nests in shrubbery that's kind of close to the ground. And if you get close, they let you know. I've also had the American bittern in those wetlands there. It's frequently seen in this position, which makes it very hard to find one. They do camouflage. I mean, this one doesn't look like he's camouflaged, but when you're out there looking for this bird, it is very well camouflaged. So they have those kind of brown stripes on their neck, and when they put their beak towards the sky, those just kind of look like more reeds. So they do blend very well. This little yellow warbler also likes the shrubby habitat of this area. He's the one that says, "Sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet." And I don't do bird sounds very well at all, but I know the mnemonics of them. So Missisquoi is loaded with these birds in the spring and summer. And another one that you can regularly see are the cliff swallows, because they nest on the headquarters building every summer. Barn swallows nest there as well, and there's also some boxes that the tree swallows will nest in. So there's always just a plethora of swallows kind of flying around the headquarters building, and you know that they're all there, but if you've ever seen swallows fly, they're going pretty fast as they're trying to catch bugs. And so you're there with your binoculars trying to ID, is it I kind of look for that white head patch, is that a cliff swallow? Or you look for that forked tail if it's a barn swallow. We also put up a few years ago some purple martin houses in hopes that we can attract the purple martins into that area as well. We've seen them there. I don't think there's any verification that they've nested there yet, but there's still hope. And this beautiful little guy was from last winter. We had quite a few, as many I think as 4 short-eared owls that spent the winter right by the headquarters building at the visitor center. And they come out at, depending on the time of year, usually around dusk to fly around. And they have a very butterfly-like flight pattern. They're very light and fluffy, is probably a bad way to describe it, but they're a lot of fun to watch. They spent from November to April last winter there, and we're hoping that they'll make a comeback, although here we are in mid-December and nobody has seen one yet. So we're still holding out hope that they might come back. They obviously were happy last winter. They spent the whole winter there, so. And it was also a location of a snowy owl a few years back. So this was, I think, during one of the eruption years where we had so many that came down into Vermont. And there was one right up at the headquarters as well. So on to the Jeep Trail. The Jeep Trail, it's closed from April through July. So don't plan on going to the Jeep Trail if, you're there in the spring. This trail kind of follows along the Missisquoi River through the floodplain forest out towards the delta. It doesn't make it out to the very tip, but it goes out pretty far. And it's an in and out trail, so it doesn't make any loop. You have to come back out the way you went in. So it's closed because we have a lot of nesting osprey along that area, and it's kind of just to the west of where the trail is. And it has the most osprey nests of any other location on the refuge. And it's also closed because of the nesting for the great blue herons. So back in 2012, there were quite a few nests at this rookery, which is out at Shad Island, which is out at the very end of the river. So back in 2012, the refuge staff monitors these birds as well. There were 412 nests on the refuge in its entirety, most of them being right out there. So that year also saw a record number of failed nests, and the number of nests has been steadily dropping ever since. So by 2022, so just 2 seasons ago, it had dropped down to 14 nests. So from 412 down to 14. So you might be asking, why, right? Because of this guy. So as you know, the bald eagle has made a dramatic comeback, and such a comeback that it was removed from the Vermont Threatened and Endangered Species list 2 years ago. So the bald eagle is doing quite well. Missisquoi has been part of that comeback. So the first eagle nest at the refuge was in 2011. And that year they fledged 1 chick. And I think this is the original nest. So by 2013, so 2 years later, the refuge now supported 2 nests. So this is what impacted the heron population. So remember, the heron nests peaked in 2012 with 400 and some, and most of the failed nests occurred. So the size of the rookery has shrunk due to this guy arriving and taking up shop at the refuge. So the hopes are that someday the herons are going to make a comeback and be able to increase their numbers at the refuge again so that they can live in harmony with the bald eagles. It has happened in other places where they had very large heron numbers and they got pushed out by the eagles, but they have made a comeback. So refuge staff has their fingers crossed that that the herons haven't completely disappeared, that the numbers will continue to build. That remains to be seen. But the eagles have been highly successful at the refuge. So since their nesting started in 2011, there's been 31 out of 33 nests that have been successful, meaning successful means they fledged at least one chick. So this year, the refuge supported its 4th nest for the first time, and they fledged eight young birds. So going back to the history of the eagle from 2022, or 2012, I wanted to say, they've fledged 62 eagles in 13 years. So that's quite a bit, of increase to the population. So, and really, honestly, when you go up there now, it's, especially during the warmer months, maybe not as much in the winter, but in the warmer months, it's hard to go up there and spend any amount of time and not see eagles. I mean, they're everywhere, so. So from eagles down to little song sparrows, plenty of these guys along the Jeep Trail. Occasionally, you'll find some eastern bluebirds. There's a lot of brown creepers, if you're familiar with brown creepers. I was just talking with Peter, I think, about the brown, so I was talking to somebody about the brown creepers. March is really when they start to sing. So the Jeep Trail is still open. They haven't closed it yet, and you get a nice warm day, and it's like brown creeper central. Like you can, if your hearing's still good, and I know when you get to our age, it's not always what it was before, but there's a lot of brown creepers there. Oh, there he is. Forgot I had his picture in here. There are also lots of woodpeckers in the floodplain forest. This is I don't have this one marked. Oh, it's because it's on this one. The yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is a migrant woodpecker. It's not here year-round, but it arrives early in the spring in March or April. There are pileatids there, the largest woodpecker that we have in Vermont. So this one is a female. Does everybody know how you can tell a female from a male pileated? So that stripe that is kind of follows its beak back down and curves around its neck, that will be red or have a reddish tinge to it if it's a male, and if it's black, that is a female. So next time you see a pileated, you'll be able to tell which it is. And the downies are prevalent as well. This is the smallest woodpecker that we have in Vermont. And I'm presuming there's quite a few little nestlings inside that hole. So this is a look at the Jeep Trail in the summer. It is quite beautiful to walk through this floodplain forest, so put it on your bucket list. Blackbirds and common grackles use this area when they're migrating through in the spring, and rusty blackbirds do as well. So they begin to show up in March and kind of peak in April. These are a threatened species of blackbird, and sometimes you can find quite a few of them in this floodplain forest. The high count is over 200 for April. So it's easy to pick these guys out because look at that eyeball, it's red, or yellow. Sorry, I said red, it's yellow. And they kind of have a brown look to them. They're not as black as a blackbird would be. The Old Railroad Passage, this is another trail. It's 3 miles round trip. Again, it's an out and back trail. It's really one of my favorite trails though because it goes through such a variety of habitats. There's field, forest, the edge of the bog. It ends at Missisquoi Bay at the water. This is a winter view. And this trail, like where that sign is over to the east there, that would be where the bog is. So this goes right along the edge of that. This trail supports a lot of open views of wildlife. So I don't always just take pictures of birds. And it also has a pretty rich bird diversity. 167 birds have been found along this trail through our monitoring walks each month. This is a cedar waxwing, a very, very elegant bird. A cousin to the Bohemian waxwing, that these are a northern bird that actually comes south during the winter. And Vermont, you can usually find flocks of those feasting on the berries during the winter months. So I mentioned that the refuge has managed grasslands, and managed means they keep them as grasslands, but they only mow them in the late summer or fall so that they're available for nesting grassland birds like the bobolink. Also in these fields, you'll find Wilson snipe, Savannah sparrows, and the threatened eastern meadowlark, which I don't have a picture of yet. Wish me luck this year. Song sparrows, American goldfinch, and also the northern harrier, which flies low over the fields looking for food. And they nest in these grasslands as well. And in the winter, the fields will support flocks of snow buntings. And I think Ken said he saw his first ones just this week. So the trail ends at the expanse of Missisquoi Bay, where a lot of water birds can be found depending on the time of year. It's usually, the water's usually pretty low in the late summer, and so you can't really get completely out to the water because it's filled in with the grasses. All right, Stephen J. Young Marsh Trail. This is a loop, another very popular trail, probably the most popular at the refuge. It gives quick access to a wetland platform if you don't want to walk the whole trail, but it is a nice flat loop walking along the forest. There's a winter view. It has a mix of boardwalks as well over some wetland areas. So the marsh area is managed by the refuge to create early successional forest. So they have created over 8 acres of young forest habitat since 2014. So they do this because this particular area of land is sandwiched between some working farmlands that are not refuge property and the bog. So it's not a big enough area to let it develop into a full-fledged forest. So they manage it this way so that there's richer bird diversity. So like a scarlet tanager, a bird that really needs an expansive forest, it needs quite a few acres to be able to, nest successfully and raise its young. Whereas species that use more shrubby habitat like this, they don't require as much acreage. So you can get more dense bird diversity in this managed area. If that makes sense. I hope that made sense. So they do this predominantly for the American woodcock. And they do it by periodically kind of cutting these 100-foot wide stripes, and they'll cut everything down and just let it grow up successionally. The regrowth is primarily aspen, which comes up, which the woodcock actually feed on. So the woodcock is a forest-dwelling, quote-unquote, shorebird. So it's related to those shorebird species, but it uses the uplands. So it uses that long beak to just probe down into the soil looking for worms. And it's also a game bird species, so people do hunt those. And there is a woodcock hunting season. The Marsh Trail supports 179 species of recorded birds through our walks, including this golden wing warbler, which I found quite a few years ago during our migratory bird day in the spring. There's a lot of palm warblers that come through in the spring as well. You'll have eastern kingbirds that utilize the marsh. They'll nest there in the summer. And there's always really something to admire from the platform in the marsh itself, even if there's no birds. The scenery is quite beautiful. This was just this past fall at our big sit. We conduct every year on this platform, so we'll sit there for 12 hours and just let the birds come to us and record everything that we can find. And I've frequently found blue-winged teal. So this is another one of those dabbling ducks. They were, I think, breeding right in the marsh because I saw them breeding right in the marsh. Baltimore orioles are frequent there, and for many years we've had orchard orioles, at least one pair of orchard orioles as well. Another bird that I don't have a picture of yet. The red-winged blackbirds are prolific there. And again, that yellow warbler loves the marsh trail. The tree swallows. The refuge had quite a few houses, the little bird houses that they put up. And throughout the years, they've taken a lot of those away, and it's definitely impacted the number of tree swallows that are there. They're still present, but not in the great numbers. During migration, you definitely get the great numbers coming through in large flocks, but as far as the breeding population, it's not as heavy as it used to be. And the common yellow throat, again, likes that shrubby habitat, as does the gray catbird. And the wood duck. It's a beautiful, beautiful bird in its breeding plumage. And I mean, everybody agrees that's a beautiful bird, but the female, I think, is just as pretty. Like, you know, you don't see it until it's in the light and it's close, but look at those iridescent feathers. I mean, it's a gorgeous bird. The marsh also supports green herons and the Wilson snipe, quite common there. In fact, this is really the only shorebird I think I have ever seen sitting on a wire. But by the headquarters, there's a pair that quite frequently you just see it sitting on the telephone wire. And here's another one of those American bitterns. Doesn't blend as well in the green grasses as it does in the fall, but he's still trying to blend in. So we've enjoyed having many close-up looks at birds there. These are right off that platform on one of the logs, the greater and the lesser yellowlegs. And then the last trail is the Missisquoi Black Creek Trail. So this is an in and out, but it's also a partial loop. And this is a picture from the flooding from the Missisquoi in 2018. So this whole area was underwater, and you can see how much underwater it was by the ice hanging there on the signs. And there you can see the rings around the trees as well. So this is a pretty typical spring view from the trail. It's a breeding home to quite a few American redstarts. So redstart is a warbler, the only black and orange one that we really have, completely black and orange. And there's really always a view of one of the creeks from anywhere along the trail. You're just beside the water the whole time. So even, in stick season, it's very scenic. Signs of the wildlife are very abundant in all seasons. There's a raccoon swimming. We have some bobcat tracks. And an abundance of beavers. Once in the winter, I was walking along and the creeks were completely frozen, and there was this big old beaver just walking down the middle of the ice. I didn't have my camera that day, but oh my God, that was an amazing, amazing picture. And it was on this trail that I found my only rare bird in Vermont, and that's the best picture I have of it. Unfortunately, I was so oohing and aahing over this bird that I forgot I had my camera over my shoulder until this is the only shot that I could get. This is a red-headed woodpecker, which is not common. I mean, there have been other sightings of them in Vermont, but it's more a mid-Atlantic and southern bird. So this guy made a presence, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time. Just forgot I had my camera with me. The trail ends at Lookout Point, and I really think this is one of the most serene places that you can find on the refuge. There's a little bench that you can sit there, and it's beautiful. This is the middle of the winter. It's beautiful there. This is a spring shot from that same location. This is summer into the fall. And stick season. I mean, it's a beautiful spot to just take a rest and take it in. So sometimes when the birds are slow, I occupy myself with other life. And I'll take photos and put them on iNaturalist and try to ID what I'm seeing. Try to identify the things that I find curious. Work at learning my wildflowers and my shrubs. Sometimes just take joy in the little things that I've come across. So whether it's a daylight bird walk or a summer paddle out the river, whether it's a winter walk or ski along the trails, or even just a drive through, Whether you're watching uncommon birds like these sandhill cranes, or admiring the multitudes of mundane Canada geese on the move, the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge is a fabulous place to spend time. So come visit. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions that came up? It just grows, and in fact, the Stephen Young Marsh used to be no wild rice there, and the wild rice has found its way into the marsh, and it is starting to take over the marsh area. So it's well, the ducks and the birds like to eat it. So I mean, it's definitely good food, but you know, it definitely changes the habitat a little bit. But it is food for the waterfowl that come through.
Bald eagle effect on the great blue's success, is that through predation or competition?
Mainly, I think it's predation, because the eagles will take a chick from the nest. So I think it's kind of that intimidation factor that bird is capable of taking one of those chicks away that influences the nesting. It's not really competition. I mean, they're both fish eaters. The herons will eat frogs and other things as well. But you know, they're kind of hunting in different ways. So I don't really think there's any competition there. It's more that fear factor of that big bird coming and taking one of their chicks. You can kayak on the Missisquoi. You can kayak on Dead Creek, which is the one that goes out into Missisquoi Bay. And the problem is, like, you would probably put in along the Missisquoi River to access any of the areas on the refuge, because to reach it from any other point, like there's, in Highgate Springs, there's a boat launch that is probably the easiest access to the mud flats at Dead Creek. So when I go take pictures there, I don't start on the refuge. I kind of come across the bay and go there. But it's a long haul from any of the other places to do that.
You can access it from the Missisquoi.
Yes, yep. And there's two different boat launches right there on the Missisquoi that you can use. So. I shoot a Canon. I have a 100 to 400 lens, and yeah, most of them were taken with that. I'd love to get a new one. I don't know if I can justify it for, so, yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So are all the trails that you showed open in the wintertime?
Yes. There are some restrictions. It's kind of a travel at your own risk during hunting season. So, you know, I think most of the hunting that does occur at the refuge is not in proximity to the trails. So I know people still do use them. They're posted to make you aware that there could be hunters out there, but you know, like any place else in Vermont, you wear your orange and you're probably pretty safe. We do, the Friends, we have a bird monitoring walk each month on the second Saturday, and we do stick to the McQuam Black Creek trails during November and December, just to make sure that there's no hunting around. So, but the other trails are open too.
Can you ski them?
You can ski the trails. There's no bicycle use, but you can ski or walk. Yep. So unfortunately, because it is federal lands that are protected for habitat, there is no foraging, which is unfortunate because the area, you know, was home for the Abenaki who utilized it for their needs. And, you know, unfortunately, when it became a National Wildlife Refuge, that had to stop. So,
It's interesting though they allow hunting.
yes. And it is interesting, hunting and fishing. So the natives can still utilize it in those parameters, but the foraging is one thing that, you know, that is not permitted anywhere on the refuge. But the Friends group, probably 2 or 3 years ago, we developed a land acknowledgement for the refuge and have since been trying to kind of incorporate the culture into what we present as well. And so the last couple of years, and if you go to our website, it's friendsofmissisquoi.org, and we have a calendar that has our upcoming events, but we're doing another series with Dr. Fred Wiseman this winter, and he's going to be looking at the ethnobotany of Vermont and the Abenaki and the plant usage for the area. So, you know, if that's something you're interested in, our talks in the winter are usually all on Zoom. They're all free. You just have to register and show up. So, but yeah, anybody's welcome for that. Long-winded answer, but I thought of some other things.
Julie, that was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
So yeah, I hope everybody can, if you haven't been there, get a chance to come up. The Friends brochures are there if you want to hear a little bit more about what we do. We have the bird monitoring walk that anybody's welcome to join on the second Saturday. We have one coming this Saturday. And another event that if you go to our website you can find the details about is every February we do something called Bird Tales. And has anybody ever attended our Bird Tales before? No? It's a lot of fun. I think this is our 9th year of doing it. We used to do it in person since COVID. Now it's an online, which is actually beneficial for a lot of people because, you know, who wants to go out and drive in crummy weather in the first week of February? So we've been doing it online and we get a pretty good crowd, but it's kind of a storytelling event. We usually have 4 or 5 different people just telling bird stories. So like 10 or 15 minutes of a great encounter or, you know, something to do with birds. And it's a lot of fun. There's just, I never know what we're going to get because I don't ask people what their story is, just that it's a good story and they come and they present it and it's interesting. So that'll be on our calendar too, that you can sign up for that.